Hey everyone, welcome back. Want to jazz up your terracotta pots? Today I'll show you 6 easy painting ideas perfect for beginners. Buzzing bees, flowers, ice cream cones, and more. I'll cover big, small, and mini pots, plus how to prep, seal, and varnish them so they last. Now let's get this potty started. So the first step before we paint our terracotta pot is we're going to take a paper towel and we're just going to clean it off from all the dust and debris on our pot. The second step is we're going to seal our terracotta pot. So basically, I'm going to show you the difference. Here is an unsealed version. This is the raw terracotta pot, and this is one that's dried and sealed. So you can see that the one that's not sealed is a little bit rough and sandy, and then the one that's sealed is smooth and it has a little bit of a sheen to it. So that's the visual difference between a terracotta pot that's not been sealed and one that is sealed. Now, the reason we want to seal a terracotta pot is because the nature of the material. So anytime water gets in the pot, or if you have a plant that's sitting in the pot and you're watering it, it's going to get absorbed right into the walls of your terracotta pot. The material is super porous. And basically what can happen is if you don't seal it and you have like a paint design on the outside, is the water could seep from the inside of your pot all the way to the outside wall and cause the paint to peel. So you don't want your hard work going to waste, and just sealing it would save you all that headache. So the sealer that I've chosen here is called Folk Art All-Purpose Sealer, and I did a little bit of research before buying this because I had some requirements. I wanted to first make sure that the sealer was made for terracotta. And then also I want to make sure that it was as non-toxic as possible. So the label here, when I read it, it said prepares and seals porous surfaces such as wood, terracotta, canvas, and paper for a smooth paint application. So that was good because it's actually made for terracotta. And also here it said that it's non-toxic and made for indoor and outdoor use, which was great. Some of the reviews I read on other terracotta pot sealers, there was one that was a spray can version, and that one people had mentioned that has a really strong chemically smell and you have to do it outside. One thing to note with this one, although it's not as strong, there is still some smell of the fumes. So what I did was I painted it inside, but I cracked open a window and let some fresh air in while I was sealing it. But once the sealer is dried, there's no fumes left. Another thing to mention is that I was reading somewhere that once you've sealed your terracotta pot, and then you apply your first layer of acrylic paint, your base layer, you should be using less paint compared to painting on a raw pot because it's so porous and absorbs much more paint. So I wanted to test that theory, and what I found was I didn't notice a huge difference. So I used about the same amount of paint doing my base layer on a raw terracotta pot versus a sealed pot, and I just wanted to mention that to you. I just want to also mention that there's a couple of situations where you actually don't need to seal your pot and you can skip ahead and just paint on it straight. So anytime you're going to be keeping it indoors on a shelf without any water exposed to it, you don't need to seal it and you can paint straight away. Anytime you're going to have a plant in it, for example, and you'll be watering it, or you're going to be keeping it outside, then you definitely want to seal it with a layer or two of sealer and then paint over top. All right, now we're going to get to actually sealing this raw terracotta pot, and I'm going to show you how I do it. So for this folk art sealer, you just need to gently shake it to make sure it's all mixed, but not too vigorously, because then there's like air bubbles and then it won't go on smoothly. And then I'm just going to pour it in my plate here, and then I'm going to take a clean dry brush and then my raw terracotta pot. And the way I like to do it is I like to put it over my fist like that, and then I take some of that sealer, and then I'm going to use the same direction to seal it. So I'm going to do up and down strokes, and I'm not going to paint the top of it just now. I'll do it later and I'll show you why. So for now, we're just going to paint, and it's very, very liquid. So if you have too much on your brush, just tap it off, and you're just going to use up and down strokes to get that on. And the nice thing here is because terracotta is so porous and dry, you can see exactly where your sealer is being applied, and it dries pretty fast, the first layer, because it just gets soaked up right into the terracotta. I'm just gonna do that all the way around the pot. Once you've done the outside of the pot, what I usually like to do is I have a piece of wax paper here. I like to place it down, and remember we haven't painted or we haven't sealed the bottom of it. We're gonna place it down like that on wax paper, because I did this on newspaper when I was doing my pots earlier, and I found that the little bit of sealer at the bottom, it stuck to the bottom of my pot, and the newspaper got stuck at the bottom. It was very difficult to take off, so wax paper is not it. So wax paper prevents that stickiness issue. So I'm going to put it down like that, and then I'm also going to seal the inside of my pot as well. So I'm just going to do the same thing, use those up and down strokes in one direction to get that sealer on, and paint the bottom to the bottom of the pot and the rim as well. We don't want to forget the rim. So once we're done doing our first layer of the terracotta pot, what I'd like to do is leave it to dry. And then what I do is I flip it over upside down, and I'll I'll seal the bottom of the terracotta pot. And then I will leave that to dry. Now, once the whole pot is dried, I'll flip it back over and do another layer the same way. So I'll do the front of the pot, the inside of the pot, leave it to dry, flip it over, seal the bottom of the pot. So now that your flower pot is sealed with your 2 layers of sealer, we're going to paint a base layer on our pots. Now, I always like to start out with a base layer opposed to starting to paint on the terracotta color, because I find that when you're painting over top a darker color, it takes multiple layers for that color to pop versus painting on a white background. I found this is also true for rocks. So for all my rocks, when I paint them, I always do a base color of white before I paint over top of it. And that just helps bring that vibrancy to the colors with less coats of paint. So the paint I use to do my base coats is titanium white, because titanium white is very opaque, and I'm using the Liquitex Basics brand here, but you can use any acrylic paint to do this in titanium white. So I'm using a foam brush here, and I'm just going to load some paint on, and just like the sealing step, we're going to put it on our fist, and we're going to use one direction of strokes to apply that paint. So I'm doing up and down strokes, and I'm just going to move my way around the flower pot to do our first layer. So also to mention here, you're going to notice once you do your first layer, it's going to look really kind of scratchy, and it's not going to look opaque. You're still probably going to see the terracotta peeking through in certain areas, which means that it needs multiple coats to get nice coverage, nice smooth coverage like this finished pot here. And then you also want to make sure you leave it to dry completely between each coat. And you don't actually have to use a foam brush. The only reason I'm using it is because the paintbrush I used for the last step in the sealing step, I had to go quickly run out to get my kids, and I didn't put it in water. And then when I came back, it was like rock hard and I couldn't clean it. So that paintbrush is a goner. So, and I didn't have anything this wide, so I just took a foam brush, and I feel like it's working just as good. So we're gonna paint all the way around, and then just like the sealing step, we're not gonna paint the base of it until this layer is dry. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip it over on its base, and we're gonna paint inside our flower pot. You don't have to. If you like the natural look of the terracotta on the inside of the pot, you don't have to paint it, but I like having my pots all white. We're gonna leave that to dry, and then what we're gonna do is we're going to flip it over. So this one I did already one coat. We're gonna flip it over, and then I'm going to paint the bottom side of it. So our whole terracotta pot is painted with one layer of paint. And that's our first layer. So as mentioned before, we want to have like a nice opaque end result for the base coat. We want to do both 2 to 3 coats following the same steps. And then once you're done that, your finished base coat for your terracotta pots is going to look like that. It's nice and smooth and opaque and ready for paint, acrylic paints, paint designs, paint pens, whatever you want to put on it. And this is the bigger one, just in case you want to see the different sizes of pots. And you're ready for the next step, and we're going to have fun with a few different design ideas. So the first pot painting idea is painting lavender on our pot. So for that, we're going to use a simple skewer and some Q-tips to paint in the stems and the lavender flowers, which makes it a super easy design. So to start out with, we're going to use our skewer and we're going to load it up with some green paint. Now you can use any green paint. I have a couple of green colors from my Liquitex Basics brand there. And we're just going to load it up on our skewer with a paintbrush, and then we're going to pick a place and we're going to stamp it down. So we're just going to place it down and kind of wiggle and jiggle it a bit, and then we're going to lift it up, and it's going to create a nice even like thin stem all around your pot. And we want them to have a little bit of an angle, and if you miss a part, you can just improvise there like that. And we're going to do that all the way around the pot, and you can use different color greens here if you want to give it a little bit of variation. And I like to also do them different lengths too. So this one I'm going to do a little bit shorter. There we go. And then I'm going to try to reuse this. So sometimes when you have a lot of paint on your skewer, you can reuse it, so you don't have to keep on reloading. There we go. And also to mention that most of the stem is going to be covered up in the next step with lavender, so they don't have to be perfect and uniform. They can have a little bit of unevenness to them. So once you're done with the stems, they're gonna look a little bit like this, or depending on the amount of stems you added on. So that's just a quick glimpse of the finished stems before moving on to the next step. So I'm gonna leave this to dry now, and then we're gonna move on to painting our lavender flowers with a fun Q-tip method. So for this Q-tip method, you're gonna take one Q-tip and you're gonna dip it in your lavender paint. And then you're gonna pick your stems that you wanna add your lavender to. So I'm gonna start out with that one there. That one's calling out to me. So I'm just going to dot some lavender on, just like that. And this is a really fun and relaxing method. And you can't do this wrong because the Q-tip puts those perfect lavender petals, it paints the lavender petals almost for you. Just like that. And we don't want to go all the way down. We want a little bit of that green stem still showing through. So basically that's it. We're going to move across or around our flower pot and pick different stems to add our lavender flower to with that same method. And if you also find that your Q-tip is getting a little bit frayed, you can flip it over to the other side. And if you have multiple shades of purple, you can add a little bit of the dark ones in there too, to give it a little bit of variation like that. To give it a little bit of depth. But you can also just use one color to keep it super easy. So when the pot is done, it's gonna look a little something like this. So I added quite a few lavender to lots of the stems, but I still have a lot of them that are poking through the bottom to kind of give it the illusion of a lavender field. So that is it for this idea. It's very simple, the stem and lavender flower. We're gonna leave that to dry, and then I'm gonna show you at the very end of the video how to seal this with a top coat so that you can have this outside or to prevent the paint from scratching off. The next design we're going to do is a simple ice cream cone, and this is a super fun and easy design. So on my palette I have a light pink and a pastel light pink, and I have a nice creamy beige. So to start out with, I'm going to grab some of that pink on my paintbrush, and I'm using a round brush here, and we're just going to paint some nice drippy melted ice cream drips on our pot all the way around. And you can choose any color here. So if you have a favorite ice cream that you enjoy, you can take your inspiration from that. Maybe it's mint chocolate chip, the nice minty green, that super easy. And then we're just gonna fill in all the way to the top. And since we did our base layer here of white, we just need, like, I can totally tell that I just need that one layer of pink and we're good. And also to make it easier to paint all the way around the jar, you can just flip it over and put it on your fist. It just makes it easier to rotate. Okay, so once we're done with our ice cream drip marks, we're gonna clean up our brush, and then we're gonna pick up that nice light and creamy beige color, and then we're gonna paint in that ice cream cone at the bottom. And so we're gonna try to get as close as we can. And if we go over that pink, it's okay, because we're gonna come in later with a paint pen and we're gonna trace right over the border between the cone and the ice cream. So we just want to get that on there. And I'm finding that the beige is going on a little streaky, which is fine because they'll give maybe a cool effect. But the reason of that, because we have a lot of yellow in this mix. I made it with equal amounts of blue, red, and yellow, and I added actually a little bit more yellow to the mix to make it more beige. And I'm finding that that really makes it more a little bit more not as opaque as the pink mixture, because the nature of yellow paint is a bit translucent to begin with. So if you find here that your beige is going on a little streaky and you want it to look more opaque, don't be afraid to let your paint layer dry and go over it with another layer of this beige. I'm going to see after I finish this layer to see how it looks, because sometimes that streaky look can actually look really neat. So I let my layer of the cone dry, and then I went over it with another layer, and I just want to show you how that looks. So that looks less streaky and more opaque. And I also went ahead and painted the inside of my pot. So I did the drip marks kind of going into the pot along with the cone like color there. So that's just an idea. But again, you can just leave that without any paint if you're just going to put a plant in it. So for the next step, we're gonna paint the waffle pattern on the cone portion. So I started it already, and basically it's just gonna be, we're gonna start by making these diagonal lines across the pot, and then we're gonna make the ones that are crossing that diagonal to make the waffle pattern. So the brush we're gonna use to make these lines here, since they're super fine, is your smallest detailing brush. And then you're gonna use a slightly darker brown than your cone mixture, the base of the cone over here. So you can take your original paint you've used for the cone and just darken it, or you can use another mix, as long as there's contrast between both of the colors. So I'm just gonna pick up some of that paint, and then I'm just gonna continue making these diagonal lines straight as I can, and I'm not too worried about making them perfect here. I'm gonna try to keep them as equally distanced from each other. So there's about like an inch and a half between each one. And I'm gonna keep them diagonal, that. And it also helps too, to get the finer lines, to thin down your paint. That is like the best advice I can give to get really fine lines. If your paint is really gloopy and thick, it's gonna be really difficult to get like crisp lines. So just add a few drops of water and make it to be like the consistency like a thick ink, and it'll just make your life a lot easier. So I'll make the last line over here, right in the middle. And then once you're done that, you're going to do the opposite. So we're just gonna make diagonal lines the other way. So we're done the cone portion. And in the next step, we're gonna have fun adding some yummy and fun, colorful sprinkles to the ice cream portion of our pot. So the next step is we're gonna be painting fun multicolored sprinkles on top of the ice cream portion. But first I'm gonna show you, I did add another detail to my cone. So I took a white paint marker, but you can also just take white paint and a thin brush, and I painted a line right close to one side of that brown line on each and every line. And that gives a little bit of an illusion of the waffle cone being like dimensional and adds like a little pop. So you can choose to do that. That's an optional step. I just wanted to show you what I did and what it looks like, so you could choose if you wanted to do it or not. And then I also did the same on the inside to make that waffle pattern on the inside of my pot as well. So now to do our sprinkles, I am using Posca paint markers because I find it gives me more control over those really small tick marks. But if you don't have Posca markers, just use a variety of acrylic paints. Just thin them down like you did with the brown paint here, and use your smallest brush, and you can achieve a very similar effect. So I'm gonna start out with here. I'll start out with this turquoise color. I love turquoise. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be painting sprinkles, and I like to do them in 3, and I like to spread them out. So I did one here, I'm gonna do one here in like the opposite direction. And then I'll do another one. I like to spread them out too, so we could add more colors like that. And they're kind of, the shape of them are kind of like little pills, like little Tic Tacs. If you've ever eaten a Tic Tac candy, then you want to make it like that shape, but much smaller. So I'll show you here, I've done one side already. So they're just like kind of long ovals. So I'm done with my turquoise. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of green. How about green? So again, I'm going to add, I like to do them in 3s, but you can do them in any way you'd like. Good, I'm happy with that. So I will show you what it looks like so far. So we're gonna go all the way around it. And then inside too. I have waffle cone and ice cream drips on the inside. And now for the final step, we're going to highlight the drip marks. So I'm gonna take a black paint marker, and again you can do this with thin down black paint and your finest detailing brush if you don't have a paint marker. Don't rush out to the store to buy one if you don't have them. You can make do with what you have at home already. That's my philosophy. I try to do that as much as possible too. I had these paint markers at home. My kids and I, we love using these Posca markers, so I already had them, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna use them. So you can just try to use as steady a hand as you can. And for me, it helps having the actual flower pot like on the table. When I lift it up higher, it just gets really shaky for me. All right, so we are done our ice cream cone flower pot, and it was easy and also fun and yummy to do, hopefully. So here you can see the black line just makes it, the ice cream drips just pop, and it gives it a really cool effect, I think. So hope you had fun. Now let's move on to our next idea. For the next painted pot idea, we're gonna make a simple face on top of our white base color. So to do that, we're going to need a pencil to start out with, and I've just traced simple arches for the eyes, and then just little tick marks as the eyelashes, a simple smile, and 2 rosy cheeks. Now to paint it in, either you can use black that's been thinned down, black acrylic paint thinned down with your finest detailing brush, or you can use a black marker, a black paint marker, which is what I'm gonna do. Okay, so to do that, this makes it easier when you have that pencil. It for your face, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a pink paint or a pink paint marker, and you're just gonna make some rosy colored cheeks. You can make them bigger, smaller, depending on the type of look you're going for. And that is all for the face. And then what I wanna do is I wanna add an embellishment at the top rim. I'm going to paint that with a nice pink paint. So I have that on my palette, and I'm gonna paint that nice pink paint. And then once it's dried, I wanna add some white polka dots on top, just as an extra design feature. So the final step here is we're gonna add in polka dots to the top rim of our painted face pot. I'll start in the middle, and I'll just add polka dots. And again, if you don't have a paint pen, no worries, just thin down some white paint and use a small detailing brush to get a similar effect. I'll show you what it looks like. And I painted another face on the other side. And this one is complete. The next idea we're going to paint are some buzzy bees, which is also a really easy design. So I'm gonna show you the other side of the pot that I've completed. So we're just gonna paint these little cute bumblebees with buzzing swirls around it. So let's start on this side. And I'm gonna show you with a paint pen, but if you don't have a paint pen, just use acrylic paint with a small brush. So what we're gonna do is we're going to color in oval shapes for the bumblebee's body. We're gonna do that all over the pot in different directions. So this one's pointing that way, this one's pointing up to give a little bit of variety. We're going to use a black paint marker now, and I'm going to show you how to do a simple bumblebee design. So we're going to do the eye first, which is a simple dot, and then we're going to paint 3 curved lines like that for the stripes, and then for the wings, they're just a heart shape. Okay, and then we're just going to repeat that for all the bees. So this one is pointing up. Three curved lines. Then a heart shape for the wings. It's also nice to have them in different directions too, because later when we do those buzzy lines, they can come from different directions. So this one's gonna come from down here, that one's gonna come from that way. So try to make them in different directions if you can. So we're done our bumblebees. Now we're going to make our dashed buzzy lines. So for this one, I want to show you here, there's different ways to do it. You can just do normal swirls, but you can also make some patterns. I really like that heart pattern, so I'm going to try to recreate that for some of the buzzy lines. So it's just a dash, it's a simple dash line. So I'm going to show you here, and it starts from the bees behind. So if we go like that, then you can go up a bit. And create a heart pattern, just like that. That's one of them. We can clean up those lines later. And then this one is going to go down like that. And this one will do coming off the top. And that is it for a buzzy bee flower pot. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's really simple, and we just use the base coat of white underneath. The next design we're going to do is a graffiti heart design, which we're going to do with paint markers, but again, you can grab some acrylic paints if you don't have paint markers. And this is a very simple idea where we're just layering hearts on top of each other. So to start out with, I'm going to grab a yellow pen paint marker, and I'm just going to paint hearts, different sizes. I'll paint a small one over here. I'm going to do all one color first, and be careful too because they smudge when they're wet. A small one, and these markers go on so nicely and very smooth. So I love using paint markers sometimes opposed to paint. So I'm going to do maybe one more over here. That. And then we're going to grab purple. Then we're going to paint, and we can overlap the hearts too. Basically, that is the gist of it. Now, if you want to go ahead and keep on layering, you can keep on layering, but that's how simple it is. Just basically simple heart designs with these awesome Art TX paint markers, and we're just layering the heart design over top of each other with different size and shape of hearts, and you get this really cool graffiti heart art effect. The next design is we're going to be painting some painterly and abstract roses, and then we're going to be adding some green leaves in between the spaces. And this one looks like it's complicated, but it really is not. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I basically have taken a mix of cadmium red and quinacridone magenta to create like a deep rosy pinky red, but you can choose like any red or any like pink you'd want. And then to start the rose, you're just gonna pick up some of that deep red or pink, and then we're gonna create the center, which are just little tick marks that kind of go in swirls around each other. They're slightly overlapping and they get bigger as you move your way outward. And they do not have to be perfect. And I do like to keep some of the white of the pot beneath to accentuate the petals. So you're just going to keep on working outward, just like that. And some of them can be pointed, like that. So that's a basic design of your rose. Very simple. And then what I like to do is, without cleaning off your brush too much, I have some white. I'm gonna grab white on my brush that has that red, and I'm going to, and my paint is still wet, I'm kind of going over some of those paint strokes and creating a little bit of dimension to them. So I'm not covering all of that deep red. I am just adding some on top of each stroke. And that gives you a nice loose painterly rose. And that's all it is. And then I'm going to clean off my brush because I want to grab some of that dark color again. And then I'm going to add another one over here in the middle. Again, they're little swoosh marks. They're small in the middle, and then they start to get longer and bigger as you move your way out of the rose, outside the rose, the outer petals. You can make some of them like pointy, some of them straighter. And we're leaving some of that white between the petals too, and they're slightly overlapping. Like that. And then what we're gonna do, oh, we're not gonna clean off our brush, I forgot. We're just gonna grab some red, some white right on our brush, and we're gonna go over some of those strokes to give it a little bit of texture, dimension, and it softens the strokes as well, which is nice. Gives it a nice abstract look. And okay, so I think I'm happy with that. There's lots of roses around the pot, and now we're going to add in some leaves to fill it in. So I'm gonna add a little bit of, this is phthalo green. Then I'm going to lighten it up a bit with some brilliant yellow green to create some warm hues. And I'm gonna just play around with these two paints here and create a green that I like. And also I like sometimes not to fully mix the paint, so have some of the dark green, some of the light green mixed in there. And then we're just going to, I don't want too much paint on my brush. So then we're just gonna paint in some simple leaves, like a leaf shape like that. that is, put my brush down and show you. That's a simple rose with leaves painting pot idea, which is very easy, very colorful, very floral. Last step of our painted pots is to seal it with an acrylic sealer. Now I'm using a spray can variety, but you can also use a brush on variety as well. The benefit of a spray can is that you can do multiple pots at once and it takes less time. But if you prefer doing, but it does have more fumes, so you have to do it outside. If you can't do it outside, then you can use a brush on variety and that should work perfect as well. Start spraying it on my pots. I've just added some stakes into the ground so I can get around the pot easier. And I'm just gonna shake my can, open it up, and then I'm going to start spraying. All the way around. And I'm just gonna wait for them to dry and then do a second coat, and then our pots are done. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed these pot painting ideas, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more painting tutorials. Drop a comment with your favorite idea or tag me on Instagram with your creations. Now until next time, sending you lots of peace, love, and color your way.